This story is titled, "My Dad Refused to Walk Me Down the Aisle for My Sister's Stupid Party, Panicked When He Saw His Replacement. Then I discovered the 30-year-old family secret that explained my entire childhood." So, I got married months ago, and holy you guys, my family drama reached new levels. Buckle up, because this is going to be a wild read. Till the end, things keep getting worse. I promise. Let's get one thing straight. My 30-female entire life has been a competition I never signed up for and wasn't allowed to win. My sister, Sarah, 28 female, wasn't just my dad's favorite. She was his mini clone, his second chance, his walking trophy, straight A student, debate team captain, professional daddy's girl, the whole package. Me? I was the footnote in the family story, the invisible child. Got a 9 in school while Sarah got a 10? Good, but you could try harder. Won a participation award while Sarah took first place? Nice effort, but nothing special. My dog, Buddy, a rescue pit bull that has more loyalty than my family combined, was the only one who acted genuinely excited when I came home, his whole body wiggling with joy, while my accomplishments at home got the equivalent of a polite golf clap. The worst part wasn't even Sarah's golden child status, it was how she weaponized it. My sweet 1616? She threw a fit because it interfered with her plans with friends, causing Dad to make me change my entire celebration so she could do both. My college acceptance to state, which I worked my ass off for, completely overshadowed by her entry-level promotion at some corporate hellscape where she basically fetched coffee for executives. She didn't just enjoy being the favorite. She made sure I knew my place somewhere beneath the fancy rug. Dad bought her for her first apartment while I was still using my childhood bedroom furniture. Growing up in that house was like being an NPC in the Sarah show. Dad would come home from work, and the first question was always, "How was Sarah's day?" Mom wasn't much better. She tried to be fair, but even she got sucked into the golden child vortex. When Sarah made the debate team, we had a special dinner. When I made honor roll, Dad asked if I'd done the dishes yet. The contrast wasn't even subtle. High school was peak, Sarah worship time. She was senior class president, valedictorian, and got early acceptance to an Ivy League school. Meanwhile, I joined the photography club and actually got pretty good at it, had some of my work displayed at a local coffee shop. Dad never went to see it, even though it was literally on his way home from work. Said he was too busy. Too busy for a 10-minute stop, but not too busy to drive 3 hours to see Sarah compete in a debate tournament the next weekend. Make it make sense? I got Buddy during my sophomore year of college. Taking care of him gave me something to focus on besides my family. He didn't care if I wasn't the favorite, I was his favorite. And that was enough. Dad hated Buddy from day one, called him that mutt, and refused to let him in the house when I visited. I had to keep him in the backyard, which meant I spent most of my visits home sitting outside with him, rather than dealing with the Sarah Appreciation Society indoors. This went on for years. When I got engaged to my boyfriend, Ethan, something weird happened. My dad, John, actually seemed interested. He offered to pay half the wedding costs and promised to walk me down the aisle. "I want this day to be special for you," he said with this weird sincerity I'd never seen before. Buddy must have sensed my skepticism because he tilted his head at Dad the entire conversation, like he was hearing a high-pitched whistle only dogs can detect. I'm not an idiot, but I wanted to believe it. Classic mistake. Part of me knew this sudden father-daughter bonding was too good to be true, but the other part was just so damn hungry for his approval that I went along with it. Ethan wasn't convinced. He'd seen enough of my family dynamics over our 3 years together to know that Dad's interest usually came with Sarah-shaped strings attached. "Just be careful," he warned me one night. "Don't get your hopes up too high." We spent the next 6 months planning venue, catering, dress, all the usual wedding crap. Dad came to exactly one planning meeting, where he spent most of the time on his phone texting. Still, he was writing checks, so I didn't complain. Buddy was going to be part of the ceremony too, wearing a special doggy tux and everything. Of course, Dad rolled his eyes at that, but I didn't care. The wedding was set for April 12th, nice spring day, outdoor venue that allowed dogs non-negotiable, and enough time for everyone to get their act together. Invitations went out in January. Uncle Tom, Dad's younger brother, was the only relative who seemed genuinely happy for me. He called right after getting the invitation, asked about what Buddy would be wearing. He'd helped me adopt him and offered to help with anything we needed. Tom had always been more of a dad to me than my actual father. When Dad missed my school events, Tom showed up. When birthdays got Sarah'd, Tom took me out for ice cream and let me vent. When I rescued Buddy, guess who helped me pick out dog beds and taught me how to train him? Not dear old Dad, who just commented that pets are expensive, like I was 10 years old and asking for a pony. Everything seemed set. Then, 1 week before the wedding, my perfectly constructed house of cards came tumbling down in the most predictable way possible, because, of course it did. That's how my family works. 1 week before my wedding, my phone rings. It's Dad not calling about last-minute details or to check if his tux still fits. Nope, calling to drop me like, concurrent, I'm a class he's losing interest in mid-semester. I won't be able to walk you down the aisle, he says, like he's canceling a lunch date that was penciled in, not a father-daughter moment that's been on the calendar for 8 months. No emotion in his voice, no apology, just a statement of fact, like he's telling me it might rain tomorrow. The reason? Sister Dearest decided to host a housewarming party on my wedding day for an apartment. She's already been living in for 3 months, and apparently she needs him more because she's at an important time in her life. Yeah, cutting a ribbon on a new door frame is clearly more life-altering than getting married. Maybe she needs help arranging her throw pillows in ascending order of pretentiousness, or maybe she just couldn't stand the thought of me having one single day where I wasn't playing second fiddle to her. I stood there, trying to process what I was hearing. I asked Dad why my wedding couldn't be his priority. I tried to keep my voice calm, like this was a reasonable conversation between adults, not me begging for the bare minimum parental support, because that would be selfish, he says. Selfish for wanting my dad at my own wedding. Sarah depends on me more. You've always been independent. If by independent he means learned to function without parental support because I had no choice, then sure, I'm the freaking poster child for independence. This has been his go-to excuse for years. Anytime I needed something and Sarah needed something, at the same time, I'd get some version of "you can handle it on your own." Translation, I neglected you so much you learned to survive without me, so now I'll use that as an excuse to keep neglecting you. I don't remember the rest of that conversation clearly. I know I didn't cry. I stopped crying over my dad's disappointment somewhere around age 12. I think I just said fine and hung up. Then I sat down on the curb and tried to figure out what the hell I was going to do now. Here's the funny thing, he was the one who insisted on being involved. I would have accepted a no from the beginning, but he had to play good dad for 5 minutes before reverting to type. I called Ethan right after. He was at work but picked up anyway. I explained what happened and he offered to come home early, but I told him not to bother. This wasn't something he could fix. This was just my family being my family. He did what he always does, listened, told me he loved me, and reminded me that in a week we'd be married, and that was what mattered. He was right, of course, but it didn't make the situation suck any less. When I got home, I threw myself on the couch with Buddy, who seemed to understand that some cuddles were required. I scrolled through my contacts, trying to figure out who could possibly walk me down the aisle on such short notice. My mom's brother lives in Australia. My grandfather passed away 3 years ago. Then I saw Uncle Tom's name, and it was like a light bulb went off. Thank God for Uncle Tom, who has been filling the dad-shaped hole in my life since I was a kid. Dad hates it, calls Tom meddlesome, says he's trying to steal his role. Hard to steal something you abandoned in a dumpster. But whatever. There's always been this weird tension between them that goes beyond normal sibling rivalry. Tom never talks about it, but you can feel it whenever they're in the same room, like there's some old wound that never healed properly. So I called Tom that afternoon. He picked up on the second ring, like he always does. I explained the situation, trying to sound matter-of-fact rather than devastated. I didn't get 2 sentences in before he said, "Of course I'll walk you down the aisle, Lily. You don't even have to ask." Just like that, no hesitation, no excuses, no checking his calendar to see if he had something more important going on, just immediate, unconditional support. We talked for about an hour. Tom didn't trash talk my dad, which I appreciated. He just listened, offered practical advice about the logistics of the ceremony, and promised to get his suit pressed. Before hanging up, he said something that stuck with me. "Your dad's missing out, not you. Remember that." Buddy, who had been listening to the whole conversation, gave a little approving huff. That night, after Ethan got home and we had dinner, I decided to send my dad a text, no crying, no begging, no emotional appeals, just the facts. I spent about 15 minutes deleting and rewriting before I hit send. "Dad, I understand. You've chosen not to walk me down the aisle on Saturday. While that's your decision to make, I won't be walking alone. Uncle Tom will be taking your place. This isn't about hurting you. It's about surrounding myself with people who actually show up for me." I hit send, then turned my phone off and went to bed. I didn't want to deal with whatever response he might have. That could be tomorrow's problem. But of course, things are never that simple with my dad. The fallout was coming, and it was going to be nuclear. I should have known better than to turn my phone off that night. When I finally powered it back on the next morning, it was like opening the floodgates of hell. 15 missed calls from my dad, 7 from Sarah, 23 text messages between the two of them. I scrolled through the texts while sitting at my kitchen table. Each message was more unhinged than the last. "Dad, call me immediately. You can't do this. This is completely disrespectful. If you go through with this Tom thing, you'll regret it. Sarah, WTF is wrong with you? Dad is so upset. You're ruining your own wedding and hurting everyone. You seriously need to chill. You sound bitter, and that's petty as hell." I was just about to mute both their numbers when my phone rang again. "Dad." I picked up, and before I could even say hello, the yelling started. His voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Buddy abandoned his breakfast and came to sit on my lap, as if he could physically shield me from the verbal assault coming through the phone. "How dare you put Tom in my place? I'm your father!" His voice cracked on that last word, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. This guy, who has spent my entire life treating me like an afterthought, suddenly wants to claim the father title. The audacity is almost impressive. I took a deep breath and somehow managed to respond with a calmness I definitely didn't feel. "A title you've never seemed particularly attached to until now." That just set Dad off even more. He launched into a rant about Tom being a meddler who was always trying to interfere with his family, how he was trying to steal his role, and how I was ungrateful for everything he'd done for me. I had to hold my laugh back at that last part. Everything he'd done for me? What, like missing every important moment of my life? Like making me feel like a second-class citizen in my own family? Yeah, thanks for all that, Dad. Really stellar parenting. The irony of him using the word family, like it's something he's actively participated in building, rather than a genetic accident he occasionally acknowledges when convenient, was not lost on me. It's like a guy who shows up to work once a month demanding Employee of the Year. "You're humiliating me in front of everyone," he said, his voice angry and what almost sounded like fear. That caught me off guard. This wasn't about me at all. This was about his image classic narcissist move. Everything circles back to how it affects him. "You're humiliating yourself," I told him. "Nothing stopped you from being at my wedding except your own choices. You bailed, and now you're mad I chose not to walk the aisle alone." He kept going, ranting about how Tom had always been jealous of him, how he was using me to get back at him for some ancient sibling rivalry. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of him raging, I'd had enough. I cut him off mid-sentence. Dad, maybe ask yourself why Tom's been more of a father to me than you ever were. The words came out sharp, but they were true. Dead silence on the other end. For a moment, I thought he might actually be reflecting on what I'd said. That maybe, just maybe, something had gotten through his self-absorbed bubble. But then came the click as he hung up on me. Of course, when faced with an uncomfortable truth, his go-to move is to bail. Why change the playbook now? I put my phone down and looked at Ethan. Well, that went about as expected. He came around the table and hugged me. You did good. Said what needed to be said. I thought that would be the end of it for the day, but Sarah had to get her 2 cents in too. 20 minutes later, my phone pinged with a novel-length text from her. I read it aloud to Ethan, doing my best dramatic reading voice to make it less painful. Using your wedding to attack Dad and me is pathetic. You've always been the dramatic one. You should be grateful he offered to pay for anything at all. Dad's done so much for both of us, and this is how you repay him by humiliating him, by letting Tom take his place. You know they have issues. You know this will hurt him. But you don't care because you've always been selfish. I was going to come to your wedding even though it interfered with my housewarming, but now I don't think I will. Congratulations on ruining what should have been a happy day for our family. By the end, Ethan and I were both laughing. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. Her housewarming party for an apartment she'd been in for months was somehow equal to my wedding. And I was the selfish one? Yeah, sure. $10 says she wrote that with Dad looking over her shoulder, Ethan said. And I had to agree. It had all the hallmarks of my dad's particular brand of guilt-tripping. I blocked both their numbers without responding. Problem solved. Buddy got an extra treat for putting up with my family drama, and we spent the rest of the day addressing last-minute wedding details instead of stressing about people who've never prioritized me anyway. That night, Tom called to check in. He'd gotten a similar barrage of messages from Dad, but had ignored them all. Your wedding isn't about him, he said simply. It's about you and Ethan. Everything else is noise. He confirmed he'd be at the rehearsal dinner the next day and told me not to worry about anything. I've got your back, kid. Always have, always will. Little did I know, the real storm was still coming, and it would change everything. I thought I knew about my family. Wedding morning arrived with the April sun streaming through my apartment windows. Buddy woke me with his usual morning ritual of gentle whines and a paw on my shoulder. Ethan had stayed at his buddy's place last night, some tradition about not seeing the bride before the wedding that his mom insisted on. Honestly, I was glad for Buddy's company. Without him, the apartment would have felt too quiet, too much space for anxiety to fill. I'd arranged for Ethan's sister to take Buddy during the ceremony and bring him to the outdoor reception later. He'd already sat through countless cake tastings and had definite opinions on the chicken versus fish debate. Fish, obviously. I caught him trying to steal some salmon off the counter during the tasting. The venue coordinator had initially tried to argue about having a dog at the wedding, but I shut that down fast. No Buddy, no wedding. My phone had been blissfully quiet since I blocked Dad and Sarah 3 days ago. Mom, Emily, had called once, sounding stressed. I told her she was welcome to come, but I wasn't unblocking Dad or changing my mind about Tom. She made some vague noises about family harmony, and then had to go because Dad was calling her on the other line. Classic mom, always choosing the path of least resistance. My bridesmaids arrived at 9:00 a.m. sharp. My best friend, Jamie, took one look at me sitting on the couch in my pajamas, stress-petting Buddy, and declared emergency mimosa needed. She wasn't wrong. I hadn't slept much, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if Dad showed up uninvited? What if he made a scene? What if Aunt Diana, Tom's wife, showed up early with breakfast burritos and practically force-fed me because I'd forgotten how to human. Diana has always been more of a mom to me than my actual mother. Buddy sat patiently while she tied a special doggy bow tie around his neck that matched the wedding colors. He looked ridiculous and perfect. Tom smiled that crooked grin that always made me feel like everything would be okay. He was holding a small wooden box, turning it over in his hands nervously. "Got something for you," he said, stepping closer. "It's nothing fancy, but..." He handed me the box, watching my face as I opened it. Inside was a silver bracelet with a heart pendant engraved inside. "Always with you, Tom." It matched the collar I got for Buddy when I first adopted him. "I know I'm not your dad," he said, adjusting his cufflinks awkwardly. "But you've never been alone, not while I've had anything to say about it." "I'm not crying. You're crying, shut up. It's just wedding day allergies, obviously." Before I knew it, we were piling into cars and heading to the garden where I was about to become Miss S. Mitchell. We arrived at the venue. Through the window, I could see guests arriving, finding their seats. My stomach was doing somersaults. Diana poked her head in to report that Tom was ready whenever I was, and that Ethan was already at the altar, looking nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs, her words. She also mentioned, trying to sound casual, that my mom had arrived alone. No sign of Dad or Sarah. I felt a weird mix of relief and disappointment. Then it was time. The bridesmaids lined up, the music started, and suddenly I was standing at the back of the aisle with Tom, his arm extended for me to hold. "Ready, kiddo?" he asked, his voice steady despite the emotion I could see in his eyes. Walking down the aisle with Tom felt right, no hesitation, no regret. When we reached the altar, he placed my hand in Ethan's, nodded at him man to man, and stepped back. The ceremony itself was perfect, not because everything went according to plan. The ring bearer, Ethan's 4-year-old nephew, announced he had to pee right in the middle of the vows, and a gust of wind nearly took out one of the flower arrangements. But because none of that mattered, I was marrying my person, surrounded by people who actually wanted to be there. During dinner, several of my cousins came up to tell me that they'd been invited to Sarah's housewarming but chose my wedding instead. According to them, when they RSVP'd no to Sarah, she'd acted like they were personally betraying her. She said, "Your wedding was just an excuse to hurt your dad," my cousin told me, rolling his eyes. Like the world revolves around their drama. Through the grapevine, aka drunk relatives with loose lips, I learned that Sarah's big celebration ended up being a pretty sad affair. Just her, Dad, and a few friends sitting awkwardly among unopened housewarming gifts and untouched appetizers. The thought of her standing in an empty living room, waiting for guests who chose my wedding instead, was admittedly satisfying. Petty? Maybe, but absolutely deserved. The highlight of the reception was Tom's speech. He got up, looking a little nervous. Public speaking has never been his thing, but his voice was steady as he addressed the crowd. "I want to thank Lily for giving me the honor of accompanying her today. Family is about who stays, even when it's hard. It's about who remembers what matters to you." He looked over at Buddy, who was now working the crowd for scraps under the tables. Even Lily's dog knows that showing up matters. Some people never learned that lesson. It wasn't a long speech, but it hit the nail on the head. The rest of the night was a blur of dancing, cake cutting, and trying to keep Buddy from stealing appetizers off the buffet table. A week after the wedding, I was still riding the post-wedding high. Ethan and I had settled back into our normal routine, except now I had a fancy new ring and occasionally caught myself saying my husband in conversation just to see how it felt. Pretty damn good, not going to lie. Buddy had reclaimed his spot as king of the couch. Wedding bow tie retired but displayed proudly on our fridge with a magnet. So it was on a Sunday afternoon. I was helping Aunt Diana load leftover decorations into her car. We'd stored a bunch of stuff at her place before the wedding, and I was finally getting around to sorting through it all. Ethan was at a work thing, so it was just me, Diana, and Buddy, who was helping by systematically inspecting and occasionally licking every box we brought out. Diana and I were chatting about the wedding when she dropped a comment that stopped me cold. Tom's always had a special connection with you, Lily, since you were a baby. Something in her tone made my radar ping harder than when Buddy hears the treat jar open from 3 rooms away. It wasn't just a casual observation. There was weight behind those words. When I pressed her, Diana looked like she was mentally calculating how much trouble she was about to cause. She suggested we sit on the porch, and my stomach dropped. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to be good. Buddy followed us like a furry bodyguard as we settled on the porch swing. The story came out in pieces. Years ago, when my parents were newlyweds, my dad, John, worked constantly 7 days a week building his precious accounting firm from the ground up. Mom, Emily, felt abandoned, a trophy wife without the trophy treatment, young, beautiful, and completely ignored. Tom was fresh out of college, living nearby, and found himself spending a lot of time with my lonely mom. They'd grab coffee, go to movies, take walks, etc., things my dad was always too busy for. What started as friendship became something else, something more, an affair. The word hung in the air between us. I felt like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over my head. Diana explained that it didn't last long, a few months at most. My mom ended it when she realized how much she loved my dad, how much she wanted to make their marriage work. But my dad eventually found out when someone saw them together and told him. He confronted my mom, who confessed everything. They went to counseling and worked through it, at least on the surface. The relationship between my dad and Tom, however, never recovered. Dad cut Tom out completely, for years. It was only when their mother got sick that they had to be around each other again, and by then, the anger had hardened into something cold and permanent. My brain started connecting dots I'd never seen before. Dad's hostility toward Tom, the way he always seemed to resent any bond. Tom and I formed the weird competitive energy that filled any room they were both in. When I asked if my dad thought I might not be his biological child, Diana quickly assured me that the timing didn't work. The affair was well over before my mom got pregnant with me. There was never any question that I was my father's biological daughter. Then why does he treat me so differently from Sarah? I asked, struggling to make sense of it all. Diana's theory was that seeing me reminded my dad of that time of feeling betrayed and inadequate. Sarah came later, after they'd rebuilt their marriage, after things were solid again. She was their fresh start. I, through no fault of my own, reminded him of a time he'd rather forget. I sat with that for a moment. That night, after a long walk with Buddy, where I basically monologued at him about my existential crisis, I called Tom. I asked him point blank about the affair with my mom. The silence on the other end was deafening before he finally asked, "Who told you?" When I pressed him, he confirmed everything. He described it as a mistake he regretted every day, something that happened when my mother was lonely, and he was young and stupid. When I asked if his relationship with me was some kind of guilt thing or paternity question, he firmly denied it. He insisted that from the moment I was born, he promised he'd always be there for me, and that had nothing to do with mistakes from the past. He confirmed that I was definitely my father's biological daughter. The timing of the affair made anything else impossible. We talked for almost an hour. Tom explained how he'd tried to make amends with my dad over the years, how he'd kept his distance when asked but couldn't bring himself to completely abandon me when it became clear that Dad was playing favorites. He never meant to come between me and my dad. He just couldn't stand seeing how differently I was treated compared to Sarah. After we hung up, I sat on my couch, staring at nothing, thinking of everything I'd learned. Part of me was angry at everyone involved, but I also felt strangely relieved. There was an explanation for my dad's behavior. It wasn't that I was inherently less lovable than Sarah. It wasn't something wrong with me. It was my dad's inability to separate the past from the present, his choice to see me through the lens of his own pain rather than as an innocent kid who just wanted her father's approval. It took me a month after the wedding to work up the nerve for a heart-to-heart with my dad, a month of wondering if I was making a huge mistake by stirring up ancient history. But I couldn't let it go. These weren't just old family secrets. They were the foundation my entire life had been built on, and that foundation was cracked to hell. The morning of our meeting, I was a nervous wreck. I chose the coffee shop near Dad's place deliberately. It was his territory, which would make him feel more comfortable. I arrived early, secured a table on the patio. Buddy settled at my feet, occasionally accepting pets from passing customers who couldn't resist his soulful eyes. The little attention hog knew exactly what he was doing. At exactly 2 p.m., my dad showed up punctual as always, the one trait I actually inherited from him. He slid into the chair across from me. Dad's first comment was about me bringing the dog, not a greeting or congratulations on my marriage, just that slight tone of disapproval he's perfected over 3 decades of parenting. Dad launched into a speech about my betrayal at the wedding, how embarrassed he'd been when people asked where he was, how Sarah's party had been ruined because no one showed up. He was eyeing Buddy warily the whole time, as if my dog might be recording this conversation for posterity. I let him finish before cutting to the chase. I know about the affair. His face went from red to white fast. When he tried to ask who told me, I cut him off. What mattered wasn't how I found out, but the fact that he punished me my entire life for something that happened before I was born. He tried to deny it, but I wasn't having it. I told him flat out that he could never look at me without seeing Tom and Mom's betrayal, so he poured everything into Sarah instead. It was like he was allergic to my existence. For once, my dad didn't argue. He stared at his coffee cup without touching it. Finally, he admitted that finding out about Tom and Mom had made him feel like a failure, like he wasn't enough. I pointed out that his solution was to make sure I felt like a failure too, not exactly Father of the Year material. He acknowledged that Sarah was easier because she didn't remind him of the worst time in his life. I realized aloud that Tom's attention toward me was just salt in the wound, but instead of dealing with his issues like an adult, he just emotionally checked out of raising me. I asked if he'd ever considered what it was like for me, growing up knowing my sister was the favorite, watching Dad show up for all her stuff but never mine, having to rely on Uncle Tom for the attention my own father wouldn't give me. After a long silence, my dad admitted he didn't know how to fix this, possibly the most honest thing he's ever said to me. I told him straight, I wasn't going to hate him, and I wasn't going to forgive him, at least not yet. Tom would stay in my life because he earned that spot. Dad could earn one too, or he could keep nursing a grudge about something that happened decades ago. His choice. But I was done being collateral damage in his emotional warfare. As I stood to leave, he asked the question that showed where his mind really was. Are you sure you're mine? I looked him dead in the eyes and told him that biologically, yes, Tom confirmed it, and the timing didn't work for anything else, but in every other way that matters, I'm nobody's but my own. I walked out, leaving him with the check and 20+ years of bad decisions to contemplate. Buddy trotted proudly beside me, tail high, like we'd just accomplished something important together. That night, I saw Tom had called. I wasn't ready to talk to him yet. Either too many emotions still swirling around. I texted him instead that I needed some time, wasn't angry, and would call when ready. His response was immediate. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. And that's the difference, isn't it? 2 weeks passed with no word from my dad. I wasn't surprised. He's never been good at difficult conversations. I threw myself into work, married life, and the futile task of training Buddy to stop stealing food off the counter. Then, on a random Tuesday, a package arrived with my dad's unmistakable handwriting on the label. Inside was a photo album I'd never seen before, filled with old pictures of me from babyhood through childhood. What shocked me most wasn't the photos themselves. It was that my dad was in so many of them, not just physically present, but engaged, smiling, looking at me with what appeared to be genuine affection. There was a note tucked into the back page. I was there. I just let everything else get in the way. I'm sorry. Not a complete apology, but maybe a start. It's been 6 months since my wedding day. Things aren't perfect with my family, but things are different, better in some ways. Clearer, at least. I know where I stand now. and I'm not looking for approval from people who can't give it. I have Ethan, who loves me without conditions. I have Tom, who's proved his loyalty 1,000 times over. I have Buddy, who thinks I'm the greatest human to ever live. Some people spend their whole lives trying to fix broken family relationships, bending themselves into pretzels to earn love that should be freely given. I'm done with that. I'm not cutting anyone off, but I'm not chasing approval either. Dad can be part of my life if he wants to be, but on terms that work for both of us. Same goes for Sarah, for Mom, for anyone else. Life's too short to live it according to someone else's expectations. It took a wedding, a dog, and a family secret for me to figure that out. Better late than never, I guess. Edit 1, OMG. Thanks for all the support and awards. Trying to read through the comments now. Edit 2. For everyone saying Tom might actually be my bio dad, nope. Timeline doesn't work. The affair happened years before I was born, and I've actually seen the paternity test Dad secretly did when I was 2. Found the results in that photo album he sent. I'm definitely his kid biologically, which makes his treatment of me even more messed up, TBH.